Good morning, everyone. It is August 7th. Welcome to the AM edition of C2-A-Days. We've got over 100 lines of notes from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, including scrimmages for week zero teams, a long list of SEC updates and clarification on the injury status of one of the ACC's top wide receivers. Getting started with some of the things you might have missed over the weekend, starting with a week zero team. Vanderbilt had a scrimmage on Sunday. Robbie Weinstein of Vandy 247 noted that the offense just ran up and down the field with quote, little resistance Sunday during the first scrimmage. There were 3 touchdowns of 45 yards or more through the air. However, it is important to note that according to Weinstein, that 5 projected starters and 9 likely contributors on defense missed the scrimmage. There were some stats that were included that were just pretty eye-popping from the quarterbacks. A.J. Swan, projected starter, was 12 for 13 passing, 183 yards, and 2 touchdowns, again, according to Weinstein. And Ken Seals, former starter, backup quarterback now, was 11 for 14, 215 yards, and 2 touchdowns. There also was a note that many may have missed or maybe discounted as not being important, but we know early in the year special teams can be crucial, and certainly some units struggle early on and can potentially lead to big plays. Matthew Habel, the punter at Vanderbilt, was not at the scrimmage, and according to head coach Clark Lee, Habel has returned to his native Australia and dealing with a personal matter, it sounds like. But if you're looking for, a unit that has the potential to make a mistake or cause a big play in a week zero game or early in the season, the punt unit is towards the top of that list. So just something to keep an eye on. Vandy's week zero opponent, Hawaii, suffered yet another potentially significant injury at the running back position, according to Brian McInnes of Spectrum Sports on Friday. Najee Bryant-Lele was spotted on crutches with his left knee wrapped. He was carted off the field at the end of a practice last week. Bryant-Lele has been the primary backup to Tylan Hines early in camp, and the Rainbow Warriors are now very, very thin at that position behind Hines. So if you're expecting an uptick in the run pass ratio on the passing side as Hawaii moves to the run and shoot, this is potentially another factor that we're probably going to see a good bit more passing this year out of Hawaii than we were expecting. And then Tylan Hines potentially in line for a heavy workload, see how he's able to handle that. A note from San Jose State, inside the Spartans 247 sports site, and Jackson Moore, who does such a great job there, made note of 3 players who did not dress for a practice over the weekend, which included potential contributor at tight end Jackson Cannon, running back Jacob Galloway, and then the big one, wide receiver Justin Lockhart, who some have considered a top 25 wide receiver in CFF rankings early this year. More noted that Cannon and Lockhart had casts on their arms. So don't know a lot of the details on that. Don't know how significant Justin Lockhart's injury may be, but cast on the arm or the hand, not necessarily a good sign, certainly not a good sign. And Lockhart had missed a couple of practices earlier in fall camp with an illness as well. So something certainly to keep an eye on as the Spartans get ready to prepare to take on USC in week zero. One last note on a week zero team: Tyler Horka of Blue and Gold, the On3 Notre Dame site, just tweeted out a video of a touchdown catch with a quick, simple line. Freshman wide receiver Rico Flores Jr. continues to dominate in Notre Dame fall camp. So if you're looking for a true freshman potential impact player for Notre Dame in that wide receiver group, consider Flores. Apparently he's off to a really, really strong start in fall camp. Moving on to the SEC, we've got a long list of SEC notes here. Working primarily from Bama 247 and Mike Rodak, who had several write-ups on the fan day activities on Saturday. There are, of course, the three quarterbacks vying for the starting job at Alabama. It was kind of interesting to note, according to Rodak, that the Crimson Tide really seemed to rotate the skill position players, specifically tight ends and wide receivers, trying to provide familiarity with each of those players and the quarterbacks who were splitting up reps. Danny Lewis, Robbie Outs, CJ Depre, and Amari Niblack all saw time on with the top group at tight end, according to Roback. He also made note that wide receivers, Ja'Cory Brooks, Jermaine Burton, and Isaiah Bond were the first team, but that Malik Benson was working in as well. You know, a lot of folks think that Benson is probably the most likely to be the top receiver for Alabama this year. That seemed to be the indication coming out of spring practice and a lot of positive reports. But it sounds like at this particular event on Saturday that was open to the public, Benson was just rotating with that top group. Rodak continued. Kendrick Law, Kobe Prentice, Shaz Preston, and Emmanuel Henderson are all in the mix for playing time at that spot, and nothing seemed set in stone. There were a couple of injuries, potentially one to keep an eye on. Elijah Pritchett, who's been competing for the starting spot at left tackle, got banged up and went to the locker room with trainers. He was replaced by who appears to be his top competition for that spot, true freshman and five-star recruit Caden Proctor, in that rest of the practice. The quarterback reps, what everybody wants to know, who took that first snap of practice. It was reportedly Jalen Milroe, followed by Ty Simpson, and then Tyler Buckner. Rodak says all three quarterbacks seemed to get snaps with elements of the first team offense during both 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 periods. And Rodak and multiple reports elsewhere indicated that Ty Simpson was the best quarterback of the day. At Auburn, the Auburn Undercover team on Saturday, the 247 site there noted that running back Jarquez Hunter is reportedly soon to join his teammates on the practice field. That's according to sources from Philip Marshall, longtime Auburn reporter there, close to the program. So it sounds like Jarquez Hunter is close to making his fall camp debut. According to these reports, it sounds like, according to sources, that Hunter is still certainly the player to beat atop the running back depth chart. But Damari Alston has had an opportunity to get plenty of action early this fall camp and has reportedly, quote, turned plenty of heads in the spring and has picked up where he left off. So perhaps Alston is going to work his way into the conversation there with Hunter sideline, and with Brian Battie also dealing with a foot injury this fall. Sounds like Alston is making the most of his opportunity potentially. A note on the wide receiver group, where Jay Fair has been practicing a bit with the first team in the slot. The second straight day, he was with the first teamers, according to this report on Saturday, and sounds like he is strong competition for Javarius Johnson at that position. Fair was someone that this particular site noted had a strong offseason and was expected to translate that into fall camp, and it sounds like that's the case. Quarterback situation at Auburn is also, of course, one of high interest, and has three quarterbacks in the mix. Sounds like, again, on Saturday, Peyton Thorne was with the ones, as was Holden Greene. Both of those players split time with the first team in a walkthrough. And Robbie Ashford was with the second group, clearly separated, it sounds like, into that second group, third quarterback to get reps. At Arkansas, there's a report on Saturday from Hog Sports and Andrew Ellis. We noted on Friday, sounded like, perhaps Tyrone Broden was slipping a little bit in the wide receiver competition. Well, apparently on Saturday, he was with the first group of receivers on the field at practice, along with Andrew Armstrong in the slot and Jaden Wilson. So tight end Nathan Bax was also getting first team reps at Arkansas. That's something we've continued to see through the early days of fall camp. Apparently running back AJ Greene was second in line behind Raheem Sanders, and the second group at wide receiver in this particular practice was Samuel Mbake, who was with the starters previously, Isaac Tesla, who apparently has been perhaps the most consistent receiver in early practices, and Isaiah Satanga, who has gotten plenty of positive remarks as well. Sounds like perhaps that receiver group is a little deeper than I personally previously expected. Luke Haas was getting second team reps at tight end, and so the incoming transfer from North Texas, Kevon Gums, is still working his way into the mix. I saw a note that he was looked a little more like a fullback, it sounded like, according to some of the observers. So we'll have to see how he plays out in that tight end group. At Mississippi State, which opened up practice late last week, Justin Robinson was the receiver that caught the eye of Jacob Bain from Cowbell Corner. Apparently, he made a, quote, awe-inspiring catch over quarterback Isaiah Fudge, during team drills. The first group of receivers included Justin Robinson, Tulu Griffin, Jaden Wally, and Xavier Thomas. Let's see here. There also was transfer Jacoby Bellizer saw a few first team snaps as well when he was not with the second team unit. Tight end, at the tight end position for Mississippi State, Jaquarius Spivey is getting first team reps currently. At Kentucky, Cat's Paws and Aaron Gershon on Saturday wrote up a report from Friday where head coach Mike Stoops hinted that a key player would miss practice Saturday due to a, quote, soft tissue issue. That was Barian Brown, the all-SEC freshman wideout last season. He was at practice but did not participate. It doesn't appear, sounds like it's not serious. He's considered day-to-day. Stoops on Friday said, quote, he shouldn't be out but 2-3 days, hopefully. So hopefully Brown will be back this week and ramping up to full speed. A couple of other players who were not available at practice, redshirt freshman tight end Jordan Dingle and freshman running back Jamarian Wilcox. Dingle was banged up and unavailable this spring. It's unclear how much time he may miss. There was also a note on Ramon Jefferson, who tore his ACL in week 1 last season. He was spotted in a red non-contact jersey for Saturday's practice. Sounds like he is perhaps close to returning to a little bit more of 100%, may not be ready by week 1. That's a little unclear. There were notes on the rotation at tight end where Isaiah Cummings is getting first team reps, but Bates, Caddis, and freshman Kamari Anderson were all mixing in with both the ones and the twos. Ray Davis, it appears, is clearly leading the running back group, but Jaton McClain and Demi Sumo Kernbaye also saw first team reps. It was interesting that Sumo apparently is also working with wide receivers. Jefferson was mixing in a little bit with the second and third teamers along with Lavelle Wright. So perhaps a little conflicting information there on Jefferson. Sounds like maybe he wasn't 100%, but also was taking some reps. So hopefully we'll get an update on him this week. At LSU, Go247 mentioned that the running back group, of course, is deep at LSU. Josh Williams, Noah Cain, Logan Diggs have all been practicing with the ones. We know that John Emery is back at practice now, former highly rated recruit there, but a couple of other newcomers who were certainly touted. Cavante Bradford and Caleb Jackson apparently are impressing the coaching staff, according to Go247, and quote, could very well be the two most explosive backs on the roster. So as you know, LSU is trying to work through camp, getting those young players acclimated, and sounds like they may have an opportunity to stake a claim for some playing time this fall. At Texas A&M, Carter Carrolls of Gig'em 247 on Sunday made specific note about the hype surrounding wide receiver Noah Thomas, the offensive MVP winner in the spring maroon and white game. Thomas really, I don't think was taken very seriously, certainly by me, quite honestly, as a potential starter, but he has been consistently, it sounds like, repping with the first team wide receivers. He's, of course, a big target, 6'6", 200 pounds, has length, the wide catch radius. And according to Carroll, sounds like his hands have really impressed so far this spring. There's also a note from Carroll's on the quarterback competition. And though, Weigman is currently getting the bulk of first team reps, we did discuss that Connor Weigman and Max Johnson were both seeing some time with the first team offense late last week. However, there are some times apparently where Max Johnson is outplaying the younger Weigman. So it says on Saturday in this particular in this particular practice, quote, Weigman looked like the better quarterback, but not by a considerable amount, at least not when considering the fact that Weigman primarily threw to the first team receivers while Johnson worked with the backups. Johnson seemed to throw a better deep ball as well. So just something to keep in mind, that perhaps that starting job is not 100% buttoned up yet for Connor Weigman, but we'll of course see how it plays out, and he does seem to at least right now have an early edge in the competition. A note on the running back group: Amari Daniels, Le'Veon Moss, and freshman Reuben Owens impressed. Carroll's made note, and to the surprise of almost no one except for that very first practice write-up we saw that did not mention Reuben Owens getting reps with either the first or second team. But Owens was apparently very, very impressive at practice over the weekend, broke off a couple of long runs, including one where he, quote, juked multiple defenders before scoring a touchdown of approximately 30 yards. That run, which saw Owens go untouched, sparked one of the loudest reactions from the A&M crowd during practice. And apparently Owens has also displayed perhaps the best hands as a pass catcher among the running back group. So pretty clearly the five-star running back is putting it together, it sounds like, and going to be a factor in that running back room. For South Carolina, Ben Portnoy and Lou Bezjak of the state made note over the weekend that the first team offense around quarterback Spencer Rattler included Dakereon Joyner in the backfield. We'd heard that Joyner was getting some reps at running back in the spring. Sounds like that is a full move, and that Joyner is basically establishing himself as the top ball carrier potentially for South Carolina early in fall camp. Omega Blake, Brown, and Leggett were the receivers with the first group. And Trey Knox was at tight end. They did note that Juice Wells was healthy, going through other drills when the media was there, but did not take apparently those top reps. So Xavier Leggett, Marion Brown, and Omega Blake were there with the number one group. At Ole Miss, we mentioned that Oregon State running back Jam Griffin, formerly of Georgia Tech, entered the transfer portal last week. He has since landed with the Rebels, who add some depth to that running back room. There was perhaps some hope among CFF players and owners that Griffin might land at a Group of Five school where he could become, one of the top backs in an offense, perhaps carry a little heavier workload. It seems right now that that Griffin probably slots behind both Quinshon Judkins and Ulysses Bentley at Ole Miss. And of course, there's a talented true freshman, Kedrick Riscano, there as well. So not the perfect landing spot for fantasy purposes, but Ole Miss, other than those three, had certainly a need for depth, and adding Griffin to the mix is probably a good thing for the Rebels, who are likely to, try to get Quinshon Judkins a little bit of a break every now and then at the running back position. All right, moving on. At Texas, report over the weekend that included Danny Davis, Thomas Jones, and Kirk Bowles of the Austin American-Statesman mentioned that Jonathan Brooks did not practice on Saturday. He apparently was out with an illness. Brooks had been repping as the number one running back for the Longhorns, and this particular write-up made mention that Killian Robinson led the running back drills that were available to the media on Saturday. We mentioned last week that Jonte Cook was outside of the top wide receiver group through the first week of fall camp. However, it sounds like the talented true freshman has made a move and is breaking into that number one rotation, or at least the two deep rotation at Texas. So good news there for Cook. We'll, of course, continue to monitor the reports coming out about him and if he's going to be able to break through and see some significant playing time early this year. Lions 247 on Sunday, and Daniel Galen reported that at Penn State, the top group with the offensive set, the top two receivers at practice over the weekend were Keandre Lambert-Smith and Harrison Wallace. Omari Evans was the third wide receiver up when they went to three receiver sets, and then moved Lambert-Smith to the slot. Liam Clifford, Caden Saunders, and Christian Driver were the next players to emerge, while transfers Malik McCain, Dante Cephas, and then Malik Miga and Anthony Ivy were next. So I know there's certainly, specifically for Dante Cephas, some high hopes that he'll be able to emerge as potentially the wide receiver one there. Lambert-Smith, of course, is going to be a factor, but Cephas, I believe, just arrived on campus, so getting a little bit of a later start than many here. And then Malik McClain saw plenty of action at Florida State early in his career, could factor in as well. But as of right now, that group and Cephas specifically has a little work to do to move up the depth chart. At Louisville, one name is consistently popping out at reports from a variety of different sources. Chris Bell, wide receiver Chris Bell, earned top wide receiver reviews from Keith Winnie on Sunday of Card Chronicle. I've seen plenty of other sites that have mentioned Bell, including on Friday, Matthew McGavick of Louisville Report sang Bell's praises. So apparently, fully healthy and really, really showing out. And it has been noticeable to me, the lack of mentions for Jamari Thrash. It seems like Bell is the most mentioned and most striking wide receiver so far in the reports that we've read. And that probably second most mentioned is Keon Coleman, the transfer from Jackson State. So Jamari Thrash has been far and away the highest drafted Louisville wide receiver this off season. And, certainly we should not write him off. But it sounds like there's definitely some competition, including a name that I'm not sure I saw drafted at all. And, best balls or any other, drafts that I've done the last few months. But Chris Bell could potentially emerge if these reports are to be believed, could emerge certainly as a starter and maybe the top wideout for a pretty prolific passing offense, or certainly one that we expect to be. At Florida State, a note from Noel Game Day and Dustin Lewis. I'm just going to read from the report. If you thought Marqueston Douglas was going to go quietly into the night now that Jaheim Bell and Kyle Morlock are in Tallahassee, you were wrong. Biscuit, nicknamed Biscuit, entered fall camp with a chip on his shoulder and made countless plays on Friday. So not a whole lot of detail there, but it sounds like that the tight end position is potentially even stronger than it looks on paper after Florida State brought in multiple transfers who both have reason to be excited in Bell and Morlock. But it sounds like Douglas is still going to get playing time, or at least is not going to concede that tight end position right away. I've also heard and read up on notes from multiple sources about Keon Coleman, who has been impressing in camp. Johnny Wilson still certainly in the mix. Sounds like his inconsistency perhaps is carrying over into this fall camp. A couple of drops, couple of potentially missed opportunities. Keon Coleman, it sounds like, has been repping quite a bit against Fentrell Cypress, the Virginia transfer, All-American candidate. And for the most part, potentially, if I'm understanding these reports, Keon is getting the better of Cypress on multiple occasions. There was a specific mention of coming down with a pass in a tight window that he bobbled slightly before reeling in. And then Coleman also got the better of Greedy Vance during a 1-on-1 period in camp over the weekend, according, again, to Lewis of Noel Game Day. At Wisconsin, I'm loving the reports from Jesse Temple of The Athletic. Apparently, Tanner Mordecai had his best practice yet on Sunday. Keontez Lewis was back in action, which is good to hear. And there were mentions basically of every every wide receiver you would expect to contribute for the Badgers this year. Catching touchdowns, big plays. Sounds like it was a really, really strong performance for Mordecai and the passing unit as a whole on Sunday. At Baylor, a quick note, running back Quaylon Jones is no longer on the roster. So that running back group continues to thin out a little bit behind sophomore Richard Reese and the incoming transfer Dominic Richardson. Quaylon Jones played 43.5% of Baylor's snaps last year. Has played quite a bit over the last few seasons, but is currently not with the program. Haven't heard that he's entered the transfer portal, at least as of Monday morning. But something to note that apparently he will not be a factor in the running back rotation for Baylor this year. At Nebraska, there were some reports last week that Joshua Fleeks, who has been a wide receiver since joining the Huskers, has also played some running back in the past, a transfer from Baylor, was not with the team last week. He apparently is back. A couple of notes on some of the combinations working with the first offense, according to Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Thomas Fedone and Bokercher at tight end have been repping with the first team unit. Of course, we still haven't yet had confirmation on Eric Gilbert. His eligibility for this season still needs a waiver, but Nate Borkercher and Thomas Fedone back, and it sounds like fully healthy, competing for that top spot at tight end. Billy Kemp has been a major factor in a lot of offseason reports that I've seen, as well as Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. The two of them, along with Bullock, are getting reps at receiver with the first team group. And then Gabe Irvin Jr. and Anthony Grant, first we've heard of Grant in a little bit, are repping with the top running back group. That, again, is according to Mitch Sherman of The Athletic. Moving to the group of five, a note on James Madison from Noah Fleischman of the Daily News Record. Through 3 days of media viewing availability, it sounds like Jordan McLeod and Alonzo Barnett III have flashed the most, but doesn't seem that anyone has taken control of that position, and Brett Griffiths is still in the mix. And according to Fleischman, quote, seems to have more zip on the ball this fall. So that quarterback competition in full swing and not yet decided. At East Carolina and hoist the colors, Stephen Ego there does a terrific job. Asked head coach Mike Houston what stood out most through 4 days into camp. This was over the weekend. Quote here from Houston: Rajay Harris is just fine. So the very first thing that the head coach mentioned, Rajay Harris. He said, Rajay Harris is just fine. That's the biggest thing. You can't even tell he had an injury. He's very confident. He's running decisively. He looks really, really good. So anybody who thought that Rajay Harris wasn't going to be a factor, at least with Marlon Gunn potentially, expected to take over the top ball carrying duties there. That probably was a bit premature. It sounds like Rajay Harris is going to have an opportunity and is at the forefront of his head coach's mind, certainly, when asked by reporters. Another note, when Houston was asked what he thinks of the chemistry early between the quarterbacks and wide receivers in camp, we've got another quote. I think we're getting there. I think you look at the guys who have been together for a while. Obviously, they have better chemistry. Kerry King, Josiah Hatford, Jalen Johnson, Shane Calhoun, and the quarterbacks, they have good chemistry. The thing is, who are the next guys? I think Brock Spalding and Jahari Patterson have both had very solid starts to camp. So maybe a little bit of an idea sort of where the pecking order could be at receiver for East Carolina, which of course has a lot of openings at the skill position spots in particular. Really, the roster as a whole at East Carolina, huge amount of turnover. They rank 132nd out of 133 FBS teams in the CFB Winning Edge returning production calculations. At UConn, thought it was an interesting note that there is competition at both the quarterback and running back positions. This is according to the Rivals site for UConn. Taquan Roberson is back and healthy and getting reps with the number one offense at quarterback. Zion Turner, who stepped in after Robinson went down with an injury in week one, it appears to be the main competition. And then the transfer from Maine, Joseph Fignano, is clearly the third quarterback in the group. Also third on the depth chart, and somewhat of a surprise to me, at least. Heard some reports, seen some things, and didn't quite want to believe it because I was so impressed with Victor Rosa last year, who really came on down the stretch as a true freshman. But apparently he is legitimately third in the running back competition right now behind Brian Bruton and Devontae Houston, who both did have a lead on Rosa last year coming into the season, suffered injuries and then lost lost playing time as a result. Rosa was able to capitalize, but apparently those two are back healthy and working first and second, respectively, Bruton and then Houston, in the running back pecking order for UConn early on. At USF, there's been plenty of speculation about the quarterback position. Of course, head coach Alex Golesh is coming from Tennessee, so there is a lot of interest as to who's going to win the job, because the potential for big-time production is certainly there. And Byron Brown had a huge into last season, probably has the highest upside of everybody in that quarterback room. But Gary Bohannon, who missed a big chunk of last season with injury and actually missed, I believe, all of spring. Certainly could not throw during spring drills because of a shoulder injury. Sounds like he's not ready to give up the job just yet. There were some quotes from multiple quarterbacks there from Golesh in this write-up that, according to Bohannon, took a lot of interest in spring ball, a lot of mental reps. I know the offense. My shoulder feels good. I'm excited for fall camp. It's physical practice. It has been a process to get to this point, but I feel ready. And one other quote from Bohannon might just sound like a throwaway line, but apparently feels, quote, like I'm in a good spot. And some of the, outside factors, not necessarily the right word, but some of the clues potentially that we've seen, such as guys getting, interviews or going to media days or repping the program. Gary Bohannon has been a very, or Jerry Bohannon, my apologies if I'm saying it incorrectly, has been kind of the face of the program in some ways. But Brown, of course, like I said, had the great into last season, took the majority of snaps in the spring, but yet to be determined. And I think that Jerry Bohannon is maybe, if I were to handicap it right now, a very slight favorite to win that quarterback job. At UNLV, Mike Ramala of the Las Vegas Sun was at the first practice for the Rebels on Friday. Said, quote, "The go-go offense," and Brendan Marion, personal favorite of mine, said that the offense was on display as the players raced to the line of scrimmage at a lightning pace. And then mentioned that Doug Brumfield, the returning starting quarterback, has been in a competition every year for that job until now. According to Gramala, for the first time, the junior lefty enters camp entrenched as the team's starting quarterback, which means no more splitting snaps with second, third, and fourth string QBs. He is getting apparently the vast majority of reps. So that is good news for Doug Brumfield, who has flashed at times and perhaps is a little underrated in a lot of CFF rankings, especially that offense is going to be moving at a very, very fast pace, piling up, the number of snaps and plays on offense this year as expected. Brumfield's going to have an opportunity to be involved in quite a lot of plays and has the potential, I think, to have a really strong season. Made note of a mention on the Appalachian State team site that wide receiver Dalton Stroman apparently has been very impressive. Had multiple 50-50 catches over the weekend. Made some other big plays in the passing game, along with receivers like Caden Robinson and Deshaun Davis. But this particular write-up from the team site was very complimentary of the 6'4" Dalton Stroman. And then our last note this morning, out of Wake Forest on Monday morning, head coach Dave Clawson announced that Donovan Greene, the talented wide receiver, certainly was in a position, it seemed, to be back and healthy fully this year. Probably was going to be, wide receiver 2 in that offense, which has been very, very prolific. Went down with a knee injury last week, a non-contract injury, as we discussed. And according to Clausen this morning, Monday, Greene is going to miss somewhere between 3 and 5 months as a result. So very, very unfortunate. Greene, of course, missed the 2021 season with a torn ACL, and appeared like he was due for a big year in 2023. But unfortunately, he is going to miss most of the season, it sounds like. That leaves Jamal Banks pretty clearly, in my opinion, the wide receiver number 1. Was already the wide receiver number 1, but 6'4", 205, in line for a really, really heavy workload outside. Taylor Morin, returning starter. And then my personal expectation is that Keyshawn Williams will be the third wide receiver in that first team rotation. However, as we have mentioned before, Wesley Grimes and Walker Merrill have the potential to emerge as well, and I'm sure are going to get plenty of snaps in addition. So that will do it for us this morning. Quite a lot of notes to catch up with from the weekend. We will be back this evening. Practices, of course, have kicked off already this morning, so we will do our best to catch up on all the important news and notes from Monday's fall camps across the country as well. So everyone have a wonderful Monday, and we will see you again this evening.